So this is going to be co-hosted by two trainers, the first of which has spent 20 years leading teams of designers and building digital projects for Fortune 500 companies, such as Adobe, Microsoft, Charles Schwab, Comcast, Disney, and Lucasfilms. Our second teacher for this session is a user experience specialist. Her design philosophy is rooted in education through action, and she's been involved in the blockchain industry since 2014. So it is my great pleasure to welcome up Charles Erdman and Kate Garrigan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi. Oh, we have a cozy room here. Do you want to talk about clash of expectations?
Yeah, so thank you everyone for coming. I'm Kate, and today we're just going to talk about the usability of blockchain products, the design, the kind of thinking that goes into not just what the technology can do, but how people are going to interact with that technology, and where there is a clash sometimes about what the technology needs to do and what people need to do. So today we're going to kind of talk about some general guidelines we use when we design products, some real-life examples of products that are on the blockchain and are not just to see how different technologies handle different situations, and then talk about what your experiences have been and what you've run into and where your kind of interests with usability and blockchain converge.
Yeah, and I would even say as an intro, I'm Charley Erdman. There is the clash of expectations also comes from a standpoint that, you know, we all have a computer in our pockets. We're used to this very polished, hugely designed experience across financial apps, healthcare, you know, you name it, gaming, social, and there's a disconnect between what's been happening in the blockchain technology space and the applications that have primarily been, you know, speculative trading in nature, exchanges, et cetera. And there's obviously a bunch of hurdles that have to happen in order for you to on-ramp and then be able to start exchanging currencies that are unusual. I mean, all this conference, I think there's a lot of talk about where it's unusual, where you find there's hiccups in terms of what I have to do to actually get a part of this that I don't find in any of my other applications or any other experiences that go on. So that's what we really we're gonna talk a little bit about. Kate and I are also going to just play off of each other. We're gonna keep it informal, and as we go through some of these examples, we figured because UX in an engineering-dominated industry, you know, user experience and that presentation layer as of yet hasn't gotten the due attention. We're not in a competitive environment right now where you've got, you know, 6 products all doing the same thing, and the way they're actually going to rise up and get noticed is the beauty of the design, the ease of use. We're not in that, you know, competitive kind of space yet. So UX clearly is not always really the focus at this moment in time. We're still building infrastructure. We're still getting those first initial products that are experimental out there. But that's going to be coming on very quickly, we hope, in the next, you know, 1-3 years. We're going to see more products that are competing against each other, and that defining characteristic of who's going to win may come down to the UX, and that's that user experience. And in total, I mean, what does it look like? What does it feel like? How easy is it to navigate to get to what I need, right? And overall, what's that experience I walk away with? That's why we call it user experience.
Yeah. So also, this is us.
Ta-da.
Contact information, it'll also be up at the end. So I'm going to skip. So how many people here are familiar with user experience? Okay, not bad. So just quick audience poll.
Quick audience poll. How many? Ooh, this is where we're tag teaming. Okay, I'm going to get in first. How many people are actually designing a product right now? Is that for your own project, or is it for a larger company? Oh, for Salt Lending. There we go. Okay. And you, what are you designing something for right now?
Startup company in fashion.
Okay. And then you got one.
This kind of app counts. I'm trying to design how Monero's wallet software will tell users about Tor and
Okay.
100% counts.
Yeah, that totally counts. Because you're abstracting, you're taking one source of information, it sounds like, creating some layer of meaning on top of that, right? And that would be a standalone product or within?
It's within the wallet software.
Okay, got it. And then how many other just developers who are interested in UX and know as you're building stuff, you should probably be thinking about that? Anybody? No developers in the room? Anybody who's an entrepreneur and actually has a product you're trying to get to market right now? Nobody there either. Okay, well, we only had 3 people raise their hands that were designers, so you guys, someone's holding something back. All right, well, we'll keep going.
So cool. So just a quick overview. User experience, the way we're going to talk about it. We want to improve user or customer satisfaction and loyalty. How? By making the utility, the usability, easy. And you want to provide some joy provided in interaction with a product. Everybody's very into the Marie Kondo. If it doesn't spark joy, it's gone. So we want to make sure we spark some joy. So this is a definition, again, from Oxford Journal. This is the pretty standard definition across the industry. So today, like we said, in the session, we're going to review the top 10 UX heuristics. They are from the Nielsen Norman Group. If anyone is familiar with them, they have a lovely website, kind of the founding fathers of usability and user experience. We're going to run through those. We're going to provide some products and examples for each heuristic. We're going to talk about the good and the bad. And then we're going to talk about how blockchain products can improve or learn from other projects or are already doing a thumbs up job. So let's start reviewing. This is the format.
The format.
As I'm getting ahead of ourselves.
Just because, again, we knew we'd probably have a fairly small group, we'll try and keep this a little more interactive, and we'll review a heuristic. And then as we're reviewing it, if you all could think in your mind about maybe products you've used that didn't do a very good job or did do a very good job with that heuristic, or even troubles you've had maybe designing a product and you got into a position where you thought like, well, I didn't know how to resolve that. I want to, if we can keep it interactive, we'll go through a heuristic and then we'll ask you guys if there's anything that is sparked for you around that heuristic.
Okay. So heuristic number 1.
Ta-da, drum roll.
So this is the visibility of system status. So what this is it, at its heart, the system should always keep the people that are using the system informed about what is going on through appropriate feedback within a reasonable time. So if you're uploading a document, you know you're uploading a document. Often you can see a progress bar, you can see a little cancel, sometimes you see a percentage. That's one example of visibility of system status. That's the low-hanging fruit example. This is also like when you are searching and sending a transaction, knowing that you are sending a transaction and with the blockchain that might take some time. So to look at some examples. So this, how many people are familiar with the Exodus wallet? Cool. So this is from the Exodus wallet, just an example. This is an example of the system letting you know what's going on. So we want to make a transfer, but it's not enough Bitcoin to start the exchange. So they've let us know that. We've started a transfer, we have to put in a bigger number. Those are the good parts about the visibility of system status. What is kind of missing from this picture is how many steps am I taking to complete this exchange? Is this the only one, or are there more? Are there other things that I may have to worry about? Is there a way I can go back? Those are the kinds of things that aren't visible in this example that would help a user, especially a user that's new to the system. And oftentimes, you're talking to someone that's building a product, and they're like, no. Our users are very familiar with this. They're very technologically advanced. We don't need to worry about that. That's not true. If a user doesn't need to worry about something, they're not going to look at it or interact with it. If they know exactly what they're doing and how many steps, they're not worried about it. It's not going to distract them, but it is going to help you gain more users. It is going to help people align with where they are, what's going on, so that when they're at their home computer making a transaction and the doorbell rings and there's a dog barking and there's a kid running around and they have to come back, it's a bit of a bookmark. They're not going to lose their place. And again, this is an example from a non-blockchain part of the world, but this is an example that gives a lot of system status. So you can see at the top, you have that back button. You have a little info bubble if you're lost. Right beneath that, you have step 3 of 6. You know, okay, I'm on step 3. I have 3 more to go after this. The bold question, do you want us to cancel your old insurance? A big yes or no. You know you've clicked yes. That is very visible. It's highlighted. It's popped up with some shadow. A little bit of visual cues to the answer you've chosen. Beneath that, a little bit of information. It might not be that important to the user, so it doesn't jump out on the page, but it is accessible. And then at the very bottom, you see there's even a progress bar. So if you missed step 3 of 6, you can be like, okay, yeah, I'm roughly about halfway there. It's telling you twice roughly where you are. And you can see these don't take up a lot of the screen. These don't really like jive for your attention, but they're there when you need it. They're there if someone is looking for them, and it's going to help a user feel more secure.
Yeah, I would say also what's interesting, about design overall is the best kind of design is that gets out of the way. But it gives you these little subtle cues that we've all become habituated around as a culture, but we don't even realize it. And the only time you actually know that design isn't working is when you actually notice something's up and something's wrong. But if we do a really good job, it's all these little subtle pieces, step 1 of 3 or whatever it is, the progress bar, all these little items make for something which people won't even think, but they feel taken care of through the process. So I had an experience this morning where I decided, Abra is a mobile wallet, an exchange, and a whole bunch of other things they're trying to move into. I invested, $200, 200 US dollars this morning, just to see what their experience was like. And at one point, they said, well, how do you want to put money in the system? And you can connect up your bank, you can wire in, or you can use a credit card. So I thought, well, I'll use the credit card, and I'll take, the hit of the 3% fee or whatever. Did $200, and it took me, when I did that, to an entirely different site. I was in the mobile app, took me into a website, so it opened up my mobile browser, did the transaction there, that did the validation of my KYC. But then when it said, okay, we're going to pull the payment down, it spun, and then it gave me, your payment is confirmed. And that was it. I went back, I was like, well, how do I know that it's going to show up? So I went back over to Abra. There was no recognition that the transaction had taken place. So now I'm worried, right? It's $200, so it's not a big deal. But the fact is they didn't actually give me a system status of saying, hey, we're thinking about this, or it's in transit. We're taking old world and it's coming into the new world, and that takes, expect something in 15 to 30 minutes. Managing my expectations by showing me the status. So it did show up. A half an hour later, I got an email saying it's now, go over to Abra and check. But they didn't hold my hand. And that's a big part of what system status does for you. Okay. Oh, I get to run the keyboard now. Oh. Okay, so match between system and the real world, we're just talking about this. Even when you do a bank transfer back to this Abra, I get confirmation when I'm in the bank. The teller will pull out a piece of paper, there's the transaction, they say it's gone through. We've gotten habituated around okay, that piece of paper is now a record. In the case of Abra, I didn't even have a piece of paper. So the system should speak the user's language. This is a big one too, where especially in this industry where there's a lot of new jargon that users have to get used to, we're expecting them to learn the industry. I mean, even in Andreas's talk this morning, and he's talking about keys, private, public, addresses. There's a whole new lingo. And so that, of course, makes it so there's more confusion. Anytime you have confusion, you're going to have hesitation. Anytime there's hesitation, you're going to have less adoption, right? And that's the whole purpose that we're trying to do, is design for adoption and long-term engagement and loyalty, as we said before. So language is a big part of that, that make them familiar to the user rather than system-oriented terms or industry-oriented terms, right? We've all met people that have a very hard time of not speaking business lingo, right? Because it's a sign of power and it's a sign of what you're talking about in a particular industry. I actually prefer the people who use no jargon at all, and because that's the person you can understand, and they understand the subject so well that they don't need to use buzzwords or phrases that are loaded with implications, right? We have to do the same thing with design. Make it simple. Let's not, make people have to relearn a whole new lexicon just for this. So, some examples of matching the real world. Here's a simple one. Again, we're going to use examples from both the blockchain crypto network world as well as the quote real world, or the world that we're accustomed to right now, because there's obviously more of those than there are in the crypto network world, because of course we're not going to invest $100 across 50 different wallets just to see what that experience is like. But as designers, we've designed systems, and so we can point to those things and where we saw that there was friction points. This is a company, what are they called again? It's Working Not Working. So if you're a freelancer, you might have experienced this. But this is a nice little status update. They make it fun, they make it accessible, they use words we all recognize. Again, this isn't a big deal. It's not a big deal because you actually can quickly scan it and look at it and understand it. It would be a bigger deal if they used language that was maybe more oriented towards the freelancer world, right? What your status is. I don't know what that would be, but you can just see how it's very easy to select my status, short little phrases that are internationally understood. This is another way we're sort of matching the real world, which is a big annoyance. And we've all experienced it. We're filling out form fields, whether they look like a form field or not. This is a sort of more sexy looking one. And I'm filling it out, and it gives me my keyboard, right? That's great. I can actually punch in letters. You see there's no numbers in there, so it's keeping me focused on numbers. When it asks for my, what is it? Is it the telephone number?
Yeah.
It gives me the keypad. How many times have you had the same keyboard and you've got these tiny little touch targets of 0 through 9 at the top? It's a small little detail, but it makes for a much smoother, nicer experience. So matching again, real world is in quotes because the real world really has become my cell phone and everything I'm used to doing on my mobile phone. I think there's a couple others, right? What did you want to say about this one,
so it's
Kate?
also important the words we use. So this is what you were talking about with the jargon. So what do we call an individual unit of a cryptocurrency? Shapeshift refers to them as assets. You can deposit them or you can receive them. Robinhood, which also deals with cryptocurrencies, if you can read it, says cryptocurrencies. Coinbase also says cryptocurrencies. We have more than one, I think we have a few at least, ways to refer to not just like the cryptocurrency itself, assets, coins, cryptocurrencies, tokens. Coming into this and saying, oh yeah, I'm gonna come in and I'm new and I'm gonna get some tokens, and then you say, oh, cryptocurrencies. Is that the same thing? And every time someone has to look something up that they're not familiar with is the time that they're leaving your product and that you may lose them forever. And you wanna minimize those. So this is not just a product-specific problem. We as a people may have to decide, do we refer to them as assets, coins, tokens, cryptocurrencies, or something else? Having a simple, jargon-free language is one of the easiest ways we can increase adoption, because then people will know what we're talking about, and we don't have to explain it to them. I think that was the last one.
Is that it?
Yeah,
So wait, before we go on, we forgot our formula.
we did.
Oh, jeez, already. Was there any, just opening up again to anybody, do you all have any examples of things you found where the language might have, even in a task flow, so a task flow is, I'm going to buy some crypto or exchange it, from the idea to all the way to the completion and getting some confirmation it's been done. Have you seen where they might have changed how they referred to the activity or the quote asset or token that you were actually purchasing or selling? Have you guys seen any examples of that, or any products out there that you thought did it really well?
Has anyone ever rage quit a website because they were confused?
Rage.
This is what we're trying to avoid, for sure. And we all remember those websites and how terrible they are, and we tell everyone about it, but we never talk about the good ones.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll go on.
So
go ahead.
We don't want to confuse people. We also want to give them freedom. We are cryptocurrency. We are empowering to the people. So users are going to make mistakes. I make mistakes plenty of times. You misclick, you wrong click, you click something you didn't mean to. You need an emergency exit. You need a way to back out of a situation. How many people have used Gmail before? Cool, you send an email and you have a little toast, message sent, undo. And if you're like, oh, I wasn't finished, or I need to attach something, or I shouldn't send that angry email, you can click undo. The email is, to the user's appearance, their mistake has been undone, what I think actually happens in the background is that they just wait 10 seconds to send your email. So that kind of technological curtain is not a bad thing sometimes. So this is kind of that mistake we have to talk about undoing. So many transactions on the blockchain are irreversible, and that scares people. We need to think about a way for them to feel confident in the decision when they click the button that, all right, I've had my chance to back out. This is cool. This is fine. So let's look at some examples. So, example 1. So user control and freedom. Okay, so I've put in my policy numbers. I'm ready. Oh, but maybe I made a mistake. Oh, there's a lovely edit policy button that I can hit. I can change my information. Those caret arrows next to coverage and what's insured. Oh, I can go in and see more information, so I have that control. That X at the top over policy, I can back out. I can go back, I can change something. Everything is here is the information I need, but it is mutable. I have control over it, and I have a way to back out if I want to. So let's look at an example where you don't really have that control. So Amazon, I filled up my shopping cart. I'm going to buy so many awesome things that have unicorns on them. Oh, I've put 10 in, and that's too many. I want to delete it. So I go to where it says quantity 1, and I click on it, and oh, all I can change is the quantity. How do I remove it? Oh, that option isn't on the page. How on earth do I delete this? And it turns out you have to...
It's hidden. It's just not as easy.
It's not as easy.
If you're really designing this properly, you would have delete next to the item.
Yeah.
It's proximity.
Or the
proximity
ability
to what you want to take.
0.
Yeah, what you want to take action
Yeah.
on. And so some people would go so far as to say this becomes dark UX, and there is a whole. I'm sure you've kind of looked at that before, but there's been, and actually it was on Capitol Hill a couple months ago, wasn't it, where they were looking at dark UX and saying, how are consumers being moved into directions that they can't get out of? And this is an intentional thing by companies. Here we have Amazon that probably has one of the biggest budgets for design or UX of most of the companies on the web. And they are intentionally, and they change probably their UX, if they've been around for what, 12, 15 years at this point?
Longer than that.
Longer? Okay. It seems like yesterday.
Maybe almost 20.
They've changed their designs a lot, but this has always been one of my great frustrations is they just don't make it easy, obviously, to move out of this flow and get back to the original shopping cart or make an edit at this stage. It's unfortunate because we're obviously all buying. They don't have anything to gain. They're already owning the market pretty securely. So that's another piece. Obviously, just giving people a way out, giving people the ability to, we don't need to force people in. And I think this is a really important piece with blockchain. We want to get people to complete on an execution because companies are going to be obviously judged upon how many kind of conversions that occur. And it may be something if you're responsible to others, that conversion rate may be your job, right? You need to be able to show, I did a good job here. We've been able to extend in this department, in this division, in this company. And but we employed tricks, and people are too savvy for that. We don't want to employ tricks. There's no need for it. So with that in mind, is there any other, if you guys, again, opening up to you all, have you seen anything out there where you went, oh, that was an experience that you remember because it felt like you lost control for a moment there? Kind of almost like my Abra story for a little bit earlier. Anything? Yeah, if you didn't hear, she was saying easy. Another Amazon story, multiple users on the same account, and when you're going through, it's not easy to change like shipping address, the billing address, maybe as it could be. I mean, that's a little bit of an extreme example because I don't know how many people actually share an Amazon account, so I can see how that probably, do you think a lot? Oh, really? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, if either none of you heard that, just the repeat is these ride-sharing applications that don't allow you to conveniently split fare in a very intuitive, smooth way. And again, I think this is sort of rampant, and it's just, there's no need for it at this point. Obviously, you're a loyal Lyft user or Uber user. Let's make it easier for us. So anyway, those are some good examples. Thank you very much for those. We're good. Thank you for those examples. Those were good ones.
Thanks, guys. Maybe after everyone, we're going to run out of
Sure.
time.
Consistency and standards.
So I think we kind of harped on this a little bit.
Yeah, different words, situation, actions mean the same thing. Again, these are coming from, this is from Nielsen, who has for years been the kind of gold standard, and they made their name on these are the heuristics, these are the things we need to aspire to with our design, and here's the basic mistakes we can't make. So this is just, again, one of them. It's sort of this combination of things. So this is, again, real world stuff, very subtle. Design is about subtlety. This is the Apple page for showing what is new in their OS updates. You see that bottom little line of extra information, save, edit, and share your shots with a little plus symbol, right? So plus can mean two things. It can either be an add or there's more. That's a bit of a different, what's often used on these panes is a little caret, a little V that's either sometimes pointed up or pointed down or pointed sideways. There's no uniformity in that. So Apple actually made a smart decision. There's a less confusion around a plus than there is with the caret in which direction that might go. Subtle thing. But when you hit it, it does a nice little, again, nice subtle thing where it actually unfurls, and then the little icon, the plus, just rotates slightly to become an X. And the X is very much a universal close, right? Really subtle, but just smooth and nice, and doesn't. Again, there's something we talk about as designers as cognitive dissonance. Fancy word to be saying, I didn't expect it to do that, or I had to think. You made me think for a millisecond, and that sort of interrupts a flow.
Yeah, and even just getting back to the using common words, we say trade and exchange and convert to mean the same thing across different platforms. With assets, coins, and cryptocurrencies, it's like even within what maybe you should have very similar words or the same word for the action, 5 different options. And again, somebody has to look something up. You could have lost them forever, and we just want to avoid that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay, so error prevention. So we want to help people recover from mistakes, back out, but we want to also maybe want to say, are you sure about that before they do something that the system may think is wrong? So better than the best error message would be something that prevents a user from making a mistake in the first place. I'm going to let my picture speak. So this first one, if you can't read it, it says, which of the 3 following words have similar meanings? Just a little quiz. You can see they're radio buttons. You have to pick 3, but they've also highlighted the entire row from you. So there's no mistaking that you can look at that and say, I've done all 3 answers. I've not missed anything. I can keep going to the next one. Without those rows, the difference between the radio buttons that are on and off is not as visually distinct. So what we have here is just a visual cue to help the user say, okay, yes, I have picked all 3 words. I can see that clearly without even thinking about it for a millisecond.
And what's another piece just to note is how you have the next and previous buttons collected. They have proximity to each other. Obviously, the other way to do that is just to separate them on either side of the page. But in this case, it's not such a big deal, and it's easier to have possibly them next to each other. That's debatable depending on the application and the use. But the CTA of next is a much clearer one with the solid button rather than a reverse white.
And then this is an example from Coinbase. So in the filling out of the form, you've put in an email, but you haven't quite gotten the whole thing, and you skip the password field. When you hit create account, it stops you. It says, I don't think this is an email, and you kind of miss this important data. This is kind of a half good, half bad example. The system did warn you, and it did say exactly what you did wrong. Your email address is invalid, and you didn't enter a password. What may be more helpful is if that error pops up immediately after you leave the box. So I typed in email@gmail, tabbed away. Having the error happen right then could allow you to fix that mistake sooner. That kind of thing really depends on your user base.
Yeah,
well.
it's extremely problematic when you've got a lot of form fields to fill out, and you press it, and then it's off, out of frame where you made the mistake, and so you got to scroll back up because you really clearly understand that form didn't seem to go through, and I submitted it, and you got to scroll back up where it says some error message next to a box, or even worse, it's all the way back at the top of the browser, right? And you had to scroll. So there's little instances we all see. Again, the idea that Kate's putting across here is, can we do something called inline feedback? Mm-hmm. So when you have, right there, it immediately makes it so you can correct that. Simple thing, it's becoming very commonplace, but as you guys know, commonplace in our, quote, digital lives that we're accustomed to right now, for some reason has just not been a priority to bring that across into the crypto network kind of products.
Yeah, because it's not just the cryptocurrency specific conventions that people will interact with. It's the little things around it too, like creating an account, looking at a website that you can't really ignore, because those are the first things people are going to see. Something that's not quite error prevention, but that does help errors. You see the little show password toggle above the password box. Is something to have shown reduced people mistyping in their passwords and having to reset them by a significant amount. So this is kind of where you have to balance that security against ease of use. When is a user going to be in a situation where displaying what password they've typed in has been like, okay, no one's looking over their shoulder, you got to trust the user at some point. That's just something to, not so much you've made a mistake, fix it before we submit it, but an aid to help the user do something that might be difficult. Typing in an obscured word isn't always the easiest. Yeah,
and I mean, my personal preference is, I think we've gone a little overboard with this hide password, and it's a little dot instead. It's like, how many times someone really looking over your shoulder? Somehow, about 6 years ago, it became a norm that people thought was an interesting little thing, and everyone started adopting it. Now it's actually just a pain in the ass. I mean, frankly, from a design perspective, we don't need that. Every time I type in a password, it has to be invisible to me, the one creating it. I mean, it's absurd. So little things like that, hopefully we can start, even correcting in this industry. If we think about the bigger opportunity with blockchain and crypto networks, is we're redefining the internet and the mistakes that were made, in the round we have right now. We should be thinking about that too with design.
Yeah, has everyone read the XKCD about the creation of a password? If not,
what is that?
You should look it up. Where this is totally tangential. It ends with a humorous, like, what is actually a safer password is 4 words that's easy for the user to remember.
Oh, yeah,
Tends to be longer, easy to remember, rather than having them put numbers and exclamation points.
Right.
And hashtags, which end up being less secure because people write them on a Post-it and put them on their computer monitor.
So is there another example at all, or is that it?
No, but we
Okay, I was just going to ask, is there anything, we have 12 minutes still, so we're on 6, so we're doing pretty well. Anybody had examples in their lives that they wanted to bring up before we move on to the next one? No, yes, no, okay.
Every airline I've ever bought a ticket at.
Yeah, so recognition rather than recall. Right, this is again really an idea about consistency. But there's also when you're hiding things and when you're making things visible on the screen. And especially in a task flow where you're entering information in, what's actually still a pertinent piece of information that maybe you should make sticky on the screen. So let's say you're making a deposit of a certain amount. Should that deposit amount be visible as you go through certain transactions? So you always remember, okay, right, that's the amount I'm depositing, and I can change that maybe at any given moment. There's a lot of examples of that out in the wild right now. There's a lot of examples where that isn't convenient. And think about how many times you've been on a website where you've been going through a task flow and you think, oh shit, I should write that down on a little sticky note next to my computer so when I have to re-enter it, I've got it. Those are the types of things that we're trying to avoid. So recognition rather than recall.
And it's simple stuff like this. It's making sure that your buttons always look like buttons so people don't have to think about it. We're reducing what we kind of call the cognitive load. We don't want people to have to think about the stuff that can be obvious. We want them to think about the task at hand. We don't want them searching for a login button or the navigation menu. You know, this is the Coinbase website. Very clear calls to action. I'm not confused. I don't have to think about what a button is or remember what it was the last time I was at this website. It is clear and present. It is a bright green. It is a big square. It is in your face. The kind of secondary important things have that same rectangle, that same shape, a little less important with the white line. But it's the simple stuff like this that tends to get dropped that is essential. Because you don't want somebody coming to your website and saying, now where was the login button again? Control F login? No, because all you did was put log in as 2 words instead of 1 word. And stuff like this can really prevent more tension than it needs to.
Yeah.
The website is though the buy and sell buttons are too close together, so if you've got spastic finger, that could be a danger.
That's a good one, right.
Fortunately, they allow you to preview your transaction, but still.
That's right.
Error prevention.
That's right.
Oop. And then another one, when you're on mobile, talking about having a sticky nav at the top with a menu and a search bar always available at the user's fingertips so that they know, okay, I'm scrolling, this is the menu, this is the search bar. I don't have to worry about going all the way back up or searching for these things that could really be at your fingertip to help you complete the task sooner.
Yeah, and one more note on buttons. Buttons, there's a whole kind of philosophy around designing buttons that you brought up. You could imagine with that example of you have 2 decisions you have to make with buttons. There's a certain hierarchy like primary, secondary, and tertiary button styles. But then there's the other decision a designer might make that's designing for his or herself rather than for the end user. This is one of the things about being a designer. You have to be totally selfless. It can't be about your ego. It has to be like what makes sense for the end user and that specific type of user that we're targeting. Yeah. You can imagine a designer here going, well, maybe buy needs to be brighter. It needs to be a color that's really, and maybe it should be red. You know, you can imagine a designer looking at that because they're a little bit smaller and they're different. They have a different function than get started. So that's a decision where a designer's making a decision by context, thinking the button should change based on context, right? And that may be a good decision, but it's probably a better decision to make all buttons, consistent rather than changing the meaning of a button based on what you think is a different contextual setting. Little nuances, but I guarantee you I've done a lot of art directing with interaction designers, and they'll do little things like this. They'll make a change, and it looks cool because it maybe goes beautifully with a design, but it functionally and from a cognitive perspective, it changes an expectation. And so you get a consistency problem and people guessing. There's 2 different things. Culturally, how we've adopted colors to have significance. In Asian countries, they have a different meaning, and European countries to certain colors. So that's something you have to take into account with international sites, right? And yes, what's the cultural bias around colors, I think is the biggest question. So in your case, you said green sort of there's positive or it's going up, right? There's growth. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, yeah, buttons and color, that's a whole world worth looking into the next time you see a design and it's at that stage where you can give some feedback. Really think about those choices. Well, this is also another sort of cultural mental model is we think of, the future and moving forward is going right.
Yeah.
Past and going backwards is to our left. That may be a cultural thing, but it's terribly annoying when they switch those and you hesitate because you go right to the right-hand button to keep going and you're like, whoa. Yeah. Little things that's the subtlety of design is understanding. To be a designer, you have to be really empathic. We talk, you've read articles about that, but you have to understand and really break down how we culturally have all this implied language in symbols and in placement.
Yeah, the cultures that read right to left versus left to right, or top to bottom.
Or up down. I would say the digital world is affecting the physical world just as much as the physical world continues to affect the digital. There was a time, and I'm of the age where I was working with print designers, and I was like, no, I'm a digital designer, and there was a whole other language, a completely different language. And in all due respect, the print designers, It's a very different process they had to go through in the printing process, which I didn't know anything about. And it frustrated the hell of them that they couldn't control color on a monitor. It wasn't the exact blue across monitors, right? Because it was a monitor.
Yeah, I went from print to digital, and there were some frustrating things, but also really glad I didn't have to deal with bleed.
Yeah, but I think in communication design overall, like signage when you go into an airport, right, or in a retail setting, really scary. I mean, DIA, when it first opened up, I don't know if any of you guys remember this, there was sign problems all over the place. Yeah. And people were being led, or they couldn't figure out where they were supposed to go, because it took about a year for them to start correcting, to understand flow patterns of people walking through that airport.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll keep going.
Okay.
We got about 3:30.
All right, we'll talk through the rest of our heuristics and then talk about our rants. So flexibility and efficiency of use. So this is kind of harkening back to what I touched on earlier. You want to help a novice user through a system for the first time by giving them little tips, helpful cues, kind of holding their hand, but you also want to let that expert user blaze through it as fast as they want. So how can you allow users to tailor these frequent actions without throwing novice users off their base? I think we have a video.
Okay, this is a little video we've all seen, right? Which is, oh, what?
Oh. Go back.
This is just your mail and the slide to delete. Again, this is multiple ways to delete an email. It's great, love it. I can either do it this way, or I could go to edit and multiple select. If I'm in the email, I can delete the email when I'm reading it. Important just to know, just like in a computer where you have a keystroke versus a file menu command, giving people multiple ways to do the same task isn't just a way of it's not just more overhead for you. It actually appeals to everybody's different, and they're mentally, how they think about things is very different. So for critical tasks, if you can give people multiple ways to do the same thing, try and do it. And then test it. I think the key thing is, if you're really building something, test it, watch the traffic, maybe do A/B variant testing, see what back to buttons, what kind of button color is more appropriate, gets more usage, causes less confusion.
Yeah.
Oh, and this is just one again. This is more that sort of idea of keystrokes versus actually a mouse click. This is helpful because for someone who doesn't know how to do it, just pressing enter is the same thing as okay. Small little thing, but it keeps people moving fast through something that should be a low friction kind of exercise, entering my email address.
And then here, a little bit more familiar with MetaMask, you can put in that gas limit and gas price, but what if it was auto-filled for the novice user? So they didn't have to sit down and figure out, oh, what the heck are they talking about here? Kind of that thing. So setting gas prices like quick, precise, high, low are something that we've started to become a little bit more familiar with, and this is the kind of thing that speeds a user through a transaction.
And talking about buttons, I mean, look at that mess at the bottom. Hot mess.
Yeah. So aesthetic and minimalist design. Don't crowd people with information that they don't need. And this is visual too. You can have something that's beautiful and rich with it still being minimalist, without it being overwhelming. So what are we talking about? Give you the image. Spotify's landing page, music for everyone. It's very clear what they expect you to do here. Get Spotify for free. You don't have all kinds of other information competing for the attention. The most important thing is the first thing you see, and nothing fights with that. Same there with this error page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a dead end.
Dead end. You know you've hit a dead end. There's nothing else you can do. But it's told in a kind of visually humorous way with the cow. Poor space cow. And then if people are familiar with Radar Relay, their website's very simple. You go to their website, okay, you can open the app. That is a very clear call to action. Additional things aren't fighting for your attention here. You know what to do, nothing's distracting you. It's still visually pleasing, but you're on your way. You're in the fast lane.
Yeah, and I would say even to developers, I mean, there sadly is, this is a complex industry, like we said. People are not helping make it easier by having different terminology. They're having very painful processes you have to go to do things. And then they also want to over-explain what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
The biggest thing we've got to do, I think, in this industry overall is simplify. And that's actually a lot harder. It's harder to simplify than it sounds. because we need to bring people in, it needs to be understandable, and we have to erase all this opacity and make things more transparent.
Okay, and I see that our time is up, but we'll do the last ones very quickly. You have to go, we understand. So, not just error prevention, but if an error does occur, we want to make sure that the user knows what happened, why it happened, and what they can do to recover for it. So a good example is Gmail. In the email I've written, I've attached photos, haven't attached anything. I go to send it, Gmail gives me a little warning and says, hey, you said I've attached in your email. Did you mean to attach something? Do you want to go back? They've given me an error message and they've told me what was wrong and they've allowed me to correct it. An error message that doesn't offer any of that is bad jump destination in Exodus. Has anyone run into this before? This is when a smart contract breaks and your transaction doesn't go through even after you've sent it. So I got this error, and it's my favorite thing to complain about, is that I was testing out a mass mutual fund for cryptocurrencies, and when I tried to pull my money out, the contract broke and I couldn't get it out. It would not let me send my own money to myself, but the only error I got was bad jump destination. It doesn't say anything else in the system. It just lets me know an error had occurred. It wasn't until I found someone very experienced in actual blockchain smart contract development to look at it for, no kidding, like 10 minutes to say, oh, yeah, it broke. It looks like you ran out of gas, which shouldn't even be possible. So this could have been a very serious error. I could have lost a lot of ETH in this. Unfortunately, I kind of figured out what was going on, and I was just sending small amounts. But we can't do this to people and expect them to come back to the system. What could have been helpful is why that happened, and even if nothing could be done, at least, sorry.
And the last heuristic, help and documentation. Obviously, we've been harping on this. Complicated industry. People are going to look for ways to help. One of the things that I worked a number of years ago on an Intuit project for TurboTax. A little interesting fact, through all the testing we did to redesign TurboTax, the larger the 1-800 sort of get help number was, and the more prominent it was in the upper right-hand corner, the less it was used. Because when people were doing taxes, which they were really afraid they're going to either screw up or not get the biggest, return, if you hide the number, it increases anxiety. If they see it right there and they know, okay, I have one click or one call and I'm going to be taken care of, it brings down the temperature, and they actually go, oh, I'll see if I can figure this out myself, and they can get through it. So that's a really big piece of the help and documentation. Make it so that you really are answering questions. Even early on, you could have an FAQ and build that FAQ over time. Talk with your customer service people. Find out what people are calling in about, the biggest problems. Here's a nice little sort of zero state type of example. You come to this, you don't know what to do next. To get started, there's no information. So it's a nice sort of helpful, hey, over there, nudge. This is another, FAQ, makes it kind of fun. We know there's a problem. No need to panic, giving a little illustration. These are subtle little things, but again, how can we bring down the temperature when someone's in a panic mode because they think they've screwed up? Or isn't that about?
Yep,
yeah.
that's about it. So.
Okay. So overall, with heuristics, I think the biggest takeaway with this is we are in a complicated industry. As of this year, millennials have overtaken baby boomers as the largest generation. This is the generation that grew up as digital natives. They have a high acuity around design and good experiences. We have to enable them in this industry if we're going to get the kind of adoption. Also, of next year, they're going to be the largest, they have the most spending power of any generation as of next year. So these are really important, these big demographic shifts, and in terms of adoption of this industry, design has a very, very critical role to play. So please go out and design well. Thank you.